Good morning. Good day. My name is Cornelia Rooks. I want to thank you for joining today. We will briefly go over some of the United States Food and Drug Administration's regulations. Today's agenda, we will discuss how FDA regulates medical devices. Most importantly, starting with FDA's mission, how FDA defines a medical device and classifications, including registration and listing, UDI, labeling, small business discounts, as well as other requirements for medical devices. FDA USA, I'm sorry, FDA United States Food and Drug Administration. From now on, we'll say FDA, so you will understand the entire thing. The FDA's mission is to protect public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, medical devices, cosmetics, and foods, as well as tobacco products and products that emit radiation. The FDA achieves this by enforcing federal rules that and rules and regulations or laws and regulations governing these products, and by providing science-based information to consumers and patients. The regulations for the products FDA regulates are found in 21 of the Code U.S. United States Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, from now on. For more info on the history of the FDA, please refer to the links below. We'll now go into the regulations for medical devices, and they are found in that 21 CFR 800 to 899. The medical device definition. Oops, sorry. The FDA defines medical devices as intended for use to diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent disease in man or other animals. They are intended to affect the structure or function of the body through physical action and not chemical action. These physical and chemical actions are related to the modes of action for these products. The product's primary mode of action should be determined to indicate how the product will be regulated within FDA. Here are some examples of a wide range of products that meet the definition of a medical device and are examples of classes of various medical devices. As I noted previously, the regulations for various devices can be found in 21 Chapter 1, Subpart Chapter H in 800 to 899. FDA ensures the safety and effectiveness through the regulation in 21 CFR. The regulations define medical device requirements that must be met before a product can be sold in the U.S. The company must identify the classification of the medical device in order to determine how it would be regulated. In other words, the company must determine the primary mode of action. The device classification depends on the labeled intended use, the risk of the device, as well as the indications for use. We'll talk more about the classifications in the next slide. Each type of device has a 3-letter product code, which is based on the level of control. These are assigned and maintained by the agency. Classification product codes help to delineate technology and indicate subgroups within a regulation. Product codes are used to identify similar medical devices and used by FDA for internal purposes. There are three classes of medical devices. Classification is risk-based, that is, the risk the device poses to the patient and or the user is a major factor in the class it is assigned to. Class 1 being the least risky, and Class 3, which carries the highest risk. Most Class 1 devices, are exempt from FDA pre-market notifications or 510K. Included are examples of both exempt and non-exempt Class 1 devices. Moderate Class 2 devices are mostly subject to FDA pre-market notification review and clearance to market. However, there are a few that are exempt. Here are examples of both exempt and non-exempt. For Class 3, the riskiest, there are no pre-market exemptions. These are subject to FDA pre-market approval and prior to market and are the most significant. When a product has been classified by law as a Class 1 or Class 2, the regulation will cite whether the product has been found to be exempt from 510K or not, as indicated here in this example. As you can see in this example, it shows that the regulation number is 862-2120. It will spell out its identification as well as its classification and whether the product is exempt or not. If the regulation does not state that the product is exempt from pre-market notification, then a 510K is required. Pre-market notification, or 510K as we all refer to it. Once the company has determined the classification of the device and that it requires a 510K, they must be able to show to FDA that their product is as safe and effective as a legally marketed device that they have identified as a predicate device. A predicate device is a medical device that is legally marketed in the US and is used as a point of comparison to demonstrate that the new device is substantially equivalent in terms of safety and effectiveness for its intended use. The 510K number will be assigned upon receipt of the pre-market notification. Once the pre-market process has been completed, the submitter will receive a letter that states the product has been cleared to market. Until this letter is received, the product cannot enter into United States commerce. Pre-market approval. The pre-market approval FDA defines as the rigorous regulatory process for reviewing Class 3 medical devices, those that are life-sustaining, life-supporting, or pose a significant risk to health, to determine if they are safe and effective for their intended use before they can be marketed in the US. This process involves the manufacturer submitting comprehensive scientific and technical data for review, including non-clinical and clinical trial results, to demonstrate the device's safety and effectiveness. The submitter will receive an approval order prior to marketing. Before the approval order arrives, the company will undergo a pre-market approval inspection. Other considerations. Here are some examples that you must consider when determining whether how your product would be regulated and what you would need to do. A software that allows a smartphone to view images obtained from a magnetic resonance imaging device for diagnostic purposes, then that would be an example of a medical device, software that is a medical device because it, in fact, has a medical purpose. An example of not being a medical device would be one that is used to drive control of motors and the pumping of medication in an infusion pump, which refers to as embedded software or firmware. Additional pre-market options. The 513G is a request to FDA to get a definitive answer on a device's classification and regulatory requirements. This is when you're unable to determine that the product is in fact what class the product fall under, but you know that it is in fact a medical device. And so this will help you determine the classification. However, FDA will come back with a response for your request. And in that response, they will give you information on the product's classification, as well as perhaps the product code under which the product falls. A de novo, however, is when you are unable to determine another predicate or similar product on the market, and it is a request to make a risk-based classification of the device under this same section in the Act without submitting a 510K. So because you don't have a predicate, you can't submit a 510K. So then a de novo decision is binding once you get a response back from that decision. Then there is the request for designation. There are two types of requests for designation. There is a regular request, which is going to be binding, and then there is a pre request for designation, which is non-binding, and you can submit that. They are a regulatory means to identify and classify a product and or either the component of FDA that will regulate the product. So let's say you have a product that is perhaps either a drug or a device. You cannot determine which it is. It would be best to submit a pre-RFD to FDA to just get some feedback from FDA as to what the device is and how which agency would regulate the device. Next, we're going to get into just one of the many regulations that FDA has for medical devices. Registration and listing. Establishments that are involved in the production and distribution of medical devices intended for commercial distribution in the U.S., including those that are imported for export only, are required to register annually with FDA. Establishments should determine their function and the requirements for registration and listing. Here is a list of how FDA defines the various functions required to register. All must register and list. However, initial importers are required to register only, but they must identify the manufacturer and medical device they are importing. These are a list. These are functions that do not require registration and listing. And you can refer to the link here where FDA produced a guidance document to assist with those functions. Here's an overview of what is involved with that. Um, it, the FDA user fee, I believe, has increased this year for registration and listing, but uh, we will update that particular slide. The official correspondent is designated by the owner operator of an establishment responsible for the annual registration of the establishment and the device listing. The U.S. agent is designated by the owner operator of an establishment responsible for the annual registration of the establishment and device listing. The U.S. agent must reside in the U.S. and they must have an address in the U.S. Post office boxes are not appropriate. And so each foreign establishment must identify a U.S. agent, and domestic importers must register before importing any products. A reminder that if your device requires a pre-market notification clearance or approval, you will have to wait until your pre-market submission 510K PMA is cleared or approved to register your establishment and list the device. Registration information must be submitted each year between October 1st and December 31st, even if no changes have occurred. Listing information must be reviewed each year between October 1st and December 31st. At the same time, you review your registration information. You must review your listing information at that time. Submit any updates as well. Once you register your establishment and list your device with FDA, the owner operator number will be assigned immediately. However, the assignment of the registration number will be assigned immediately. Will I'm sorry, the owner operator number will be assigned immediately. However, the assignment of registration number may take a few days. Official correspondent. That's the person designated by the establishment owner operator to be responsible for the annual registration of the establishment, the device listing, and to receive and review official correspondence from the FDA. While the owner operator creates the official correspondent account, it it is ultimately responsible and has management authority over the establishment. The correspondent is the primary point of contact for maintaining registration and listing information and handling FDA communications on behalf of the firm and the establishment. The U.S. agent responsibility again. Any foreign establishment engaged in the manufacture, preparation, appropriation, compounding, or processing of a device offered for import into the U.S. must identify a United States agent. Foreign establishments must notify FDA of the name of the business, of the address, the phone number, and email of the United States agent, even if an establishment manufactures various medical devices, drugs, or biologic products. Each establishment can identify only one U.S. agent. The agent must reside in the U.S. again and maintain a U.S. place of residence. The agent must be available to answer the phone or have an employee available to answer the phone during normal business hours. Establishment inspections. Once you register and list as a medical device company, FDA may conduct an inspection of your facilities. There are several types of inspections: pre-approval inspection, routine inspection, or for cause inspections. Importantly, the frequency of inspection can vary based on risk with the device and the company's compliance history. Please see the link below to get additional information on establishment inspections. Next, we will move into the Unique Device Identifier, or UDI. The FDA established the Unique Device Identification System to adequately identify medical devices sold in the United States from manufacturing through distribution to patient use. The Unique Device Identification System final rule requires device labelers, typically the manufacturer, to include a unique device identifier, or UDI, on device labels and packages, except where the rule provides for an exception or alternative. The company should submit device information through the Global Unique Device Identification database, better known as GUDID. Here is the out the a diagram of the UD barcodes. A unique device identifier is a unique numerical or alphanumerical code that generally consists of the following: the DI, which is a mandatory or device identifier, is a mandatory fixed portion of a UDI that identifies the labeler and the specific version of the model of the device. The production identifier, or PI, a conditional variable portion of the UDI that identifies one or more of the following when included on the label: the serial number, the expiration date, the lot or batch number, the dates manufactured, the distinct identification code for a human cell, tissue, or cellular and tissue-based product, or ACT/P, that is regulated as a device. So the Global Unique Device Identification Database, or GUDID, is required to be submitted to FDA and is administered through, as I stated, this GUDID. GUDID includes a standard set of basic identification elements for each device with a UDI and contains only the device DI, which serves as the key to obtain device information in the database. GUDID does not include the production identification identifier, or PI. Understanding the labels and labeling and why they are important. Section 201 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act distinguishes between label and labeling. A label is any written, printed, or graphic matter that is affixed to the device or any of its immediate containers or wrappers. And so keep in mind how FDA defines immediate containers, as you see here. The labeling, on the other hand, includes labels and any other written, printed, or graphic matter upon the device or accompanying the device, and includes the listed information there. Labeling should be in English unless solely distributed in Puerto Rico or in a territory where the predominant language is one other than English. And this is a requirement for products that are sold in the U.S. The labeling should contain the intent and purposes or intended use of the device being sold. So here is a copy of a compliant label, which includes the actual UDI on the label. And so you will note that this is a label, and which is a part of labeling for an ultra implantable product. And then this is an example of a threader or floss on the right, on your right. Once a company has registered their facility and listed all devices, the regulations state that this registration and listing does not denote approval, clearance, or authorization for the facility. If this happens, the product becomes misbranded. Once a company is registered and has a registration number, FDA does not issue certificates for this registration. However, FDA does issue export certificates to companies to facilitate exporters fulfilling the importing country's requirements. The use of FDA's logo on a commercial medical device label, it is prohibited to actually use the FDA's logo. You cannot use that for any commercial medical device. So we'll get into some of the user fees. This is not all inclusive, as well as what we say about the small business. So medical device user fees are payments that manufacturers make to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to fund the review and regulation of medical devices, supplement congressional appropriations, and speed up the availability of safe and effective medical products. These fees are authorized by the Medical Device User Fee Amendments (MDUFA) program, which is reauthorized every 5 years and covers costs associated with business, registration, pre-market submissions, like F510Ks and pre-market approvals, and other regulatory activities. As example of one of the user fees, here is the correct number for the 2026 registration fee. It's $11,423. However, depending on the type of submission, there may be a waiver or a reduction through the Small Business Determination Program. So, more about the small business application. That is defined by FDA as one with gross sales of less than $100 million in the most recent tax year. Starting in August 1st, applications are submitted electronically to FDA and may take up to 60 days for approval. Therefore, it would be prudent to determine whether the company qualifies prior to submitting applications or registrations, and then you would be able to take advantage of the small business fee for either your registration or application. So here are some additional requirements. While again, not all inclusive, we will discuss some requirements that you may have heard of. So certain other types of products, medical devices, may also be in the first example, combination products. For example, it may be as I spoke about earlier, a drug medical device combination product, in which case the drug has the primary mode of action. And once that drug has the primary mode of action, then the company must follow drug regulations. And one of those regulations would be to register as a drug manufacturer and list the drug and device combination in your drug listing. If the product is a radiation emitting device, and for example, an X-ray, then that device would also require um, those to follow those radiation safety regulations that can be found under 21 CFR 1000 to 1050. And here's a link for additional information in that area. So I conclude with the services that Registrar Corp can provide for you. Here's a list of all the services that we provide. And if you have any additional questions about any of these services that we provide or anything that I've talked about previously, feel free to reach out anytime. We are here to help. And I want to thank you for your attention today. And here's our contact information. And I will now open it for any questions and answers. And I thank you so much again. Jesus Christ, what happened to the day?
You need to go back to the GoToWebinar.
I'm trying.
GoToWebinar.
Yeah, I think, did I hang up?
The left one, the first link in the browser, the first tab in the browser. No, in the browser, the first tab.
Um,
Just open the browser, please.
yeah, I'm trying to. I don't can't see find it. That's what I'm looking for.
The
Oh, I'm sorry. There
You
we are.
can
I'm so
in the
sorry.
browser. Yeah,
Okay.
the first tab. Yeah, click that, and
Mhm.
you can click on the questions there. Yeah, the question mark icon right there.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you just click on the question, and it
Got
will
it.
appear.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. The first question I have a question concerning importing nitrile gloves from Malaysia to the US. The manufacturer has all licenses, FDA licenses. Do we need to print FDA on each box, or is it fine on the master box or even on the pallet? Well, you shouldn't print FDA on any of the boxes unless that is a requirement, the outer packaging or the shipping packaging to go through customs. But on the actual medical devices themselves, on the actual nitrile gloves, no. However, if you are an importer in the US, then you must identify that manufacturer and the nitrile gloves that they are in fact exporting to the US. If you are an exporter sending products into the US, you must register and list those products and have an authorization from the manufacturer for the products. Second question. If working with orthotics being imported from China into Canada and then importing to the US, does the Chinese factory need to be FDA registered? Yes. The Chinese factorer must must actually register as the manufacturer of that medical device, and even though it is going through Canada into the US. Next question. A follow-up question. Would the US entity or the Canadian entity need the FDA approval for import? No, but because it's being shipped from Canada, if this is in response to the last question, um, the approval, if necessary, or clearance, if it is a 510K device, or neither approval or clearance, if it's exempt from pre-market review, then that company who is the manufacturer again would need to register their product. Next question is, what is the continuous glucose monitoring device classification? That is a class 2 device subject to 510K. Next question, we want to export sunglasses from Italy to the US. We want to sell the private customer directly by our website with our distributors and dairies in USA. Have we to have an initial importer? You can sell directly to the consumer. However, it would be best to register your facility that you're exporting the sunglasses and also list those devices. Next question. If our product is on the European market and the company is ISO 13485 certified by European notified body, do we need to register in the US? If you are selling or commercializing the product in the US at all, you need to identify your function first, and whether that function is one that requires registration and listing. And FDA only identifies certain certifications, or it's a it's called the international harmonization, where they will actually identify these ISO standards. And 13485 is, in fact, one that FDA identifies, but it does not preclude you from registration and listing of the product if it is required to be the facility be registered and the device listed. Next question. I think this says, we just acquired a device company which has a number of class 1 devices developed in the 1970s and 80s that haven't been sold with UDIs in the past. Once we make our establishment registration, will we need to wait up to 90 days to be able to generate our new UDI for these products and continue to sell them? Well, you will have to definitely, if there are products that require not all of these class 1, if any class 1 products, but particularly those that require pre-market submission, you may need to double check to see if the UDI is required. Generally speaking, just a general way to tell if the product is GMP exempt, then it may not need a UDI. So you can check that first to be sure I would reach out to our division that actually handles the UDI to respond to that. Okay. Um, if our product is on the European market and the company is ISO 13, we have responded to that question. Next question: do sunglasses need 501 and 510K? Um, no, sunglasses are 510K exempt. If the brochures do not include any claims that the information is FDA cleared or approved, do they still require regulatory control and review? Again, it depends on whether the product is subject to 510K or a PMA, which means it would be class 1 or class 2 that is not exempt from pre-market review, or if it is a class 3 that is in fact requires a pre-market approval, then those products would have to go through FDA for their review, only for products that are class 1 and class 2 that are subject to 510K or PMA. If a product is 510K exempt from pre-market review, then they would need to only register the facility and list the device. How can I get the predicate device details for establishment substantial equivalence? Can I request FDA to issue us the identified predicate device? No, FDA cannot identify your predicate device. What you can do is to go to FDA's database. They have a registration and listing database would be your best option to identify a currently legally marketed predicate device. You would search um, in that database in a number of different fashions. You could search the product name, you could search the proprietary name, you could search the company's name. So there are a number of ways you can search in that database to be able to find an adequate predicate device. Next question. How can I okay, we check that off. If the brochures do not include any claims that the information is FDA cleared or approved, do they still? We have answered that one. Non-medical device item being purchased through a distributor. Importer is FDA registered. Does the manufacturing distributor need FDA registration and only the distributor need FDA? There on one of my slides where I talk about what the functions are, you will see who is required to register and list. And this in a non-medical device item being purchased through a distributor. If it's a non-medical device and it is not a medical product, then you will not need to do registration and listing with FDA. If it's not a medical device, if it's not a drug, if it's not a cosmetic, if it's not a biologic, if it's not any of the products that FDA regulates, then you don't have to go through FDA. However, if it is, then the manufacturer and the importer are required to register. However, the importer um, I'm sorry, the distributor does not need to register or list. So I hope that answered that question. If the devices are approximately 70% similar with around 30% differences, is it possible to bundle them into a single E-Star submission? I, that's not clear to me as to which E-Star submission you are making and whether you're trying to get a clearance for a particular product that is similar in different ways. And it really depends on what the similarities are and what the differences are as to whether they can be submitted together under pre-market notifications. Um, if you are speaking about registration and listing, then you if they fall under particular regulation and they have the same product code, you can submit them. So I would have to have more information to be able to better answer that question. Okay. Can one obtain the substantial equivalent discussion of a device that is determined to be the yes? The answer to that is that you can obtain a copy of what's called the summary and effectiveness safe information, and that will be included in FDA's database if you know the company's name and perhaps the name of the predicate device. So you can search in the FDA 510K database that, and it will come up with the predicate device information and the S&E document, that summary, um, that would be helpful in determining whether this is an appropriate predicate device for you or not. Next question. We are supplying male condoms to the US with 510K. How we can establish a different 510K respect to color and flavor? Can we use blue color product for natural color? If you already have a 510K clearance for this device, then you, as the 510K holder, would have to determine whether these changes to the condom will impact the safety and effectiveness of the condom. And so you would have to make that internal determination as to whether it raised new questions of safety and effectiveness. And if it did, then you would need to submit a new 510K. If it did not, then no 510K is necessary, and then you can, when listing that the additional modification um, condoms, the modified condoms, then you would use the same 510K number. After identifying the correct predicate for the five for the F in the FDA's database, how can I get the identified predicate device 510K technical detail for showing substantial equivalence? Well, generally in those summaries, they may very well have a table of some descriptive types of details, but not any in depth. And so the only other way for you to be able to get that in-depth information of what's in the technical file in the 510K, then you would have to request a freedom of information from FDA to get that additional information. We sell different colors of frame and lenses of the same kind of sunglasses. Do we have to register all the combos? It would be best to list all the different proprietary names of the various frames and various lenses that you want to sell within the US. Could the predicate device be from a different company or must be from the same one that is trying to register the new product? No, the predicate device could in fact be from a different company as long as it has the same intended use as the predicate, and you have determined that it is as safe and effective as that predicate device. It does not matter whether it is from the same company or from a different company. I believe, let's see, I think I may have, here's another concerning eStar. Concerning eStar, another question. Class 2 devices with similar function, sterilization, and packaging. Okay, so if you have a Class 2 device that is subject to 510K and you are are actually submitting it from the first time to FDA as a 510K, then you would have to have a 510K clearance for any product that is similar in function, sterilization, manufacturing, and packaging. These are class 2 products that are subject to 510K. If you have already received a 510K clearance letter for that product, and the devices and the new device has a similar function, sterilization, manufacturing, and packaging, then you have to go through again that flow chart. And if you reach out to me, I can send you the flow chart so that you can walk through the flow chart to determine whether that product requires a new 510K or not. Otherwise, you can use the same 510K. Next question. We wanted, and I'm going to take one more question. We wanted to register a medical device that is a COVID flu self test. From our understanding, a clinical study made in the US is necessary, and the cost is around $3 million. I'm wondering if we understood well or not. I cannot particularly answer that question as to the cost of clinical studies in the US at all. But I do know that there have been COVID flu self tests that have been cleared through the 510K program. So you may be able to determine that there's a predicate device and show that your device is as safe and effective as the predicate device. One more question. Okay. For 510K exempt products, is there a code and a letter? This is occasionally requested. For 510K exempt products, there is a product code um, in the FDA classification database. So again, the regulations under which these product codes fall um, will spell out exactly what the indication is for that particular product. The 3-digit product code actually delineates different products under a particular regulation. So sometimes there are 3 Sometimes one, sometimes there are numerous product codes under one regulation. And it's FDA's way of being able to delineate the differences between the products that fall under particular regulations. So that product 3-digit code is what's needed in order to um, list a medical device with FDA. Again, I want to thank you so much for your attention and the wonderful questions that were raised. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me um, at my email address. It is cbrooks, CBROOKS at registrarcorp.com. So again, thank you again.